Carramore.
Perfect, thank you. We're going to start off with a song called Eleanor Plunkett. It's a tune by the famous harpist Carlin. So, as you know, the harp is very much a part of our Irish heritage, and very, very proud and privileged to be able to play this instrument. So we're going to start off with this Eleanor Plunkett.
That was wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, beautiful.
Now we're going to move on to a song, and just to mix it up a little bit, I'm just going to get rid of something up on the screen here. Perfect. So we're going to move on to sing Galway Bay. So I think, Martin, you had requested this one. We weren't sure which version, so we actually have two prepared for tonight. So I'm going to sing the traditional version, and then later on Amy might treat us to Dolores Kane's version.
Dolores Kane's version, yes.
Yeah. So here we go. If you ever go across the sea,
light that he can to stars. And if there's no way to heal hereafter, and somehow I'm sure there's going to be, I will ask my God to let me make my inactive and across the Irish Sea. I will ask my God to let me make my heaven in that dear land across the Irish Sea.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Thank you.
And
Now we're
Amy,
gonna go into,
so maybe one more. Yeah.
yeah, one more. Do your version. Yeah. Yeah, we might do a few jigs and then do Amy's song, and that'll be it then. Is that okay?
That is perfect. Thanks a million. That sounds great.
Okay. Here goes, so.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you. That is fantastic. Thank you so much. I put you on spotlight there, but you're going to be in the spotlight so many times again. So many thanks for that. Really appreciate that. And thanks, Albert, for getting us sorted to have a wonderful start there. So I'm going to just hand over now to, I'm going to just share the screen for a second, just to say thank you there to Madeline and Amy. And then our next is going to be Michael. And Michael is going to give us the version of the Boys of Carrowmore. So Michael, can you just get yourself there suited up and ready? And
can you hear me?
I can hear you, and we're going to be hearing you in a few seconds. in
Okay.
terms of getting yourself in the Boys of Carrowmore. So looking forward to this. Go ahead, Michael.
As I strolled out one evening in the year of '63, I rambled down the Abbott Road, my comrade boys to see. I met them all together, as oft I did before, and I stayed that night till broad daylight with the boys from Carramore. My curse be with that landlord who had them separate, and into a foreign country they had to immigrate. They had to seek a livelihood upon a foreign shore. And now they're all away in America, the boys from Carramore. Bad luck be with Reddington Roach, he was the son of a gent. He was afraid to turn me out because I was a smith. He sent them to America because he was so keen. And those of them who stayed at home were transported to Clonkeen. In walking through those green fields, it makes my heart lament. When I think of my comrade boys and the hours with them I spent. When I think of my comrade boys who cheered me here before, and you may believe it's for them I grieve, the boys from Carramore. Good luck be with those Abbott boys, and indeed I'm sure it will. But it's lonely they have left me here at the corner of Ryehill. Oh, 'tis lonely they have left me here, all sorrow, grieved and sore. And now they're all away in America, the boys from Carramore. So now they're all departed, no longer I can stay. I'll pack up my little goods and I'll go to America. 'Tis there I'll meet some of the boys of which I do adore. And when I drink, I'll fondly think of the boys from Carramore.
Hey, well done, Michael. Well done. That was fantastic. Thank you very, very much. And Michael, just a quick thing. Where did you learn that song yourself?
Well, I got the word out of it from Michael Kavanagh from Abbott. Michael was born in a pandemic and he died in a pandemic.
The Lord have mercy.
It was 100 years and 4 months. He died only in the middle of this pandemic.
Yeah.
I got the words from Michael a number of years ago. There's 11 verses in it, but I seen some of them going to sleep there, so I better stop.
We're going to have some more of the verses later on. If
Okay.
that is good, that is good.
Okay.
Mila Buihes, that was fantastic. I'm going to just hopefully now going to get back to I'm going to just minimize my screen here for a second and go back to what we're going to be looking at tonight is those words that Michael said. And I'm just trying to find my own screen here to put it up. The Boys of Carrowmore and defined why that happened and the events of that time in the 1880s. So I'm going to just go back to sharing my screen. Sorry about this. And hopefully it's not coming up at the moment for me. So I'm going to just share and then I'm going to just share again, a new share. Here it is. So that was Michael there with the Boys of Carrowmore. So sorry for those technical difficulties. Can you all see the screen from where you are now? I've just put up just what we're going to be doing. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen, Garmarket, Brady, and everyone. So I'm going to just, I recognize, I see some faces there, and I know that there are people that are joining us from Australia and from different parts around the country and different parts around the world. So you're very, very welcome. So what I'm going to do over the next 40 minutes or so is just give you a little introduction to first the location of where Carramore was, who the landlord was in the area, a small bit of local history, and then some of the tenants and the tenants' names that were in the townland that we know of, and then what happened during 1860-61 and leading up as well to 1862. So first of all, if you recognize this place, well done. It's in East Galway. Monivea is just down to the south. This is Carramore. So Abbott and Gilka, my home village, just across the way, Cashlandara and Ryehill. And it's a place just between Newtown in Abbey and going up Ryehill, then going up to Monivea proper itself. And these are the townlands, and some of them we're going to be mentioning this evening. So Carramore itself, there's two different ways of spelling it. So this is the official way. I know some people spell it with A as well, C-A-R-R-A-M-O-R-E. So both the names are accepted in the local area. So it's right beside Abbott and Ryehill Domain. So we're going to just have a look at what that looks like geographically, because a map doesn't show everything, so satellite does. And you can see this big, huge expanse of bog. The Abbott bog is right in the middle. So this is the area that we're going to be talking about here. And this is Ryehill Domain. And then further down here is Abbott. So I just want to start with that location and to show it within maps so people get an idea of where it is. So again, we're going down to Monivea, and further down here would be Athenry, and over here then would be Galway City, and Newtown and Abenakmoy, and further north here then would be Tuam. So one of the things that I wanted to have a look at is to see, when was Carramore settled first? Was it a new village or an old village? And one of the first maps to show it was a map by Alex Jones, an engineer, in 1812 for the Bogs Commission in Ireland. And that map showed the domain of Ryehill and also Abbott Domain here. And Abbott you can just possibly make out here. And you see the little house here, if you look close enough, there's a little house for the domains. And all along the roadway are houses and some trees to show that there's some settlement in that area. And this area here, number 16, is really what the map was for. It was the bogland that was there. So if we just go close in, we will see that Carramore was well settled over 200 years ago. So this is a map from approximately 1812. And just a little bit later on in 1819, William Larkin was asked to have a map made of the county as well. And he puts in Carramore, and this is the alternate spelling of Carramore. So you see Ryehill Domain here, where the mass is, and then Abbott Domain. And it's a little bit more clear, I think, on this map. So this is the settlement of Carramore. And we're going to see that there's kind of two parts in a way to the village. So the next map is quite a lot clearer. So the red line there shows the townland boundary. So you can see the extent of it. It crosses the main road that would be coming down from Monivea to Newtown in Abenakmoy. And you can see that just outside the gates here, this is Ryehill Domain. There is one part of the settlement. And then just further along the road and up along another road is the second part of the settlement. And in between are the fields that these families would have farmed. This map is from 1838 and is the first edition Ordnance Survey map. And this here is the bog that we saw earlier in the satellite map. So I'm going to just take these two sections and just have a look to see what was there today. So this section here is just, this is Ryehill Domain. And so Tony Killarney's house is going to be here in this area, and across the road here at present is going to be Dolly's Forge. And as you can see there, that was a bit of woodland at the time. So quite possibly the forge would have been just slightly away from it. So we're going to just hopefully get this working. This is the present day map. And you can see in the present day map where the houses would have been. And there's one house that's been built here recently. So it's just on the border, but it's pretty much green field. So hopefully this should work. And I'm going to just do that. So where are we looking at? I had my camera focused in on this way. So what we're doing is looking across to these fields and looking up this road here. So if you look, it's green fields at the moment. I was hoping that there might have been bumps in the field to signify where houses were, but after 200 years, or 160 years rather, a lot of the bumps where the houses would have been taken down. So I just wanted to show what it was like at that stage. Then just to move on across the road. So again, this is just this area here where the houses would have been across the road. Again, just where the sheep are grazing at the moment. This is the second site from closer to Ryehill Domain. So you can see that it's pretty much grassland. And then just moving up the way, there's two more places where I wanted just to show. So this is looking in just at this area here, just at the main road coming up. So I'm looking down this direction, and again, where there would have been some houses and just a little bit further on. So you can see pretty much that everything that had been there has been leveled. And after 160 years, there's hardly anything that is left to show that there was some significant housing going on at that stage. And the final bit of footage is just up the road again. And this is just about 300-400 yards further up the road. And it's looking back. This section here is going to be Ryehill Domain. And so this is looking in at this area here where these houses would have been at that stage. So again, it's nice and lush grassland. So this is just to show people who are not familiar with the place where it is and the location of that. And I just want to move on then to just talk a bit about the landlord at the time. And the landlord was Blakeney of Abbott. So again, it's just this map here is from the Landed Estates database in UI Galway. And it shows the green dots where local landlords would have been. This is Reddington Roach here, and this is going to be Carramore. So it's not too far away where Abbott was. In the 1940s, this house was completely knocked down and there's nothing surviving. The main laneway going into the house is now kind of like a bypass road that comes up. And at the back of it is a house, Richard O'Neill's. But all of this has sadly been lost to us. So who are the Blakeneys? Well, according to the Landed Estates website, it talks about them as members of a family of Elizabethan settlers. And then they were granted lands at Castle Blakeney by the Cromwellian commissioners. So they had been here in the 1580s, but they had kind of like not been in Galway themselves, but because they had backed the parliamentary forces in the civil wars in Ireland and back Oliver Cromwell, they got the O'Kelly estate of Gallia, which they renamed Castle Blakeney. And they arrived over into Abbott in 1720. And they Tuam Herald of 1933 has an extensive report on who they were and who they married. And it talks about the Blakeneys coming from Norfolk in England, where they had large estates. And then John Blakeney, son of Robert, married Sarah Pearse of Roxburgh. And he was the Dean of Kilmacduagh. And it seems that Abbott was somehow within his remit. And because of that, the Blakeneys are going to arrive in Abbott. Their own house in Gallia in Castle Blakeney was burnt in 1720. So some of the other names that appear in their family tree are the Ormsbys and also the Mahons. And those names are kind of going to be significant because they're going to be cousins of those families, and they're going to help each other over time. So this is just a little bit of a closer look at that. And it talks about there John Blakeney, son of Robert of Castle Blakeney, marrying. So it seems that his family are the ones, his eldest son, Colonel Robert Blakeney, and all of them were well connected. They were MPs for Athenry. So Athenry was what was called a rotten borough. Basically, you bought the seat, and the Blakeneys seem to have a hold of Athenry for several generations. So the eldest son, John Blakeney, we'll see in a few minutes. He's going to be very prominent. He's going to be the High Sheriff for Galway in 1819. And he marries Charlotte Mahon, who is the Baroness of Castlegar. Castlegar is just beyond Haskra. So this is some of the other extensive estates that they had. They had Greenhills in Ballymac Ward, they had Ashfields again in Ballymac Ward, and they had just inside Roscommon, Doondermot. So they were well connected, and through marriage, they had extensive lands in the area. The other family that's involved in the song is the Reddington Roaches, and their house was, this photograph was taken possibly by the Land Commission in around 1912 when the house was being sold off and the lands around it was being sold off. Local people recognize the bell tower, which Tony Killarney has extensively refurbished in the last number of years, but all else aside from the basement is now long gone, sadly. So Reddington Roaches, again, they were connected to the family down in Kilcornan, and again, very extensive landlords in the area. So two quite wealthy landlords on either side of Carramore. So this is, again, some of the things. So I want to just turn now to what was going on, and you can see here one of the connections of the Reddington Roaches. Miss Reddington was married to a Mr. Moynihan, and he had died, and this obituary was published, and it noted that he was a nephew to the Liberator, Daniel O'Connell. So they were quite well connected, the families around the place. So just a little bit on what was happening in the area in the 40 years before the evictions. So going back, Abbott is mentioned in some newspapers because of, this is the first mention of Carramore in 1806, where the lands were going to be rented. And normally at this time, the lands were going to be rented for a lifetime or for a certain amount of years. But later on in the 1820s and 30s, that became a yearly thing. And it talks about the lands, they've been much improved by drains, ditches and walls, and now in good stead. So it was quite good farmland that the families were employed in farming at this stage. In 1810, it talks about the help that Theophilus Blakeney, the landlord at the time, gave to his tenants. He actually got 100 yards of Irish cloth to make 50 coats. And the Sounders newsletter described it as very, very good to have this landlord doing so well for his hardworking poor fellows of tenants. So there seemed to have been a good relationship in the area, but that was going to change, and it was going to change dramatically. And in this case, in March of 1820, the newspaper reported about that Mr. Blakeney of Abbott and his relative, Mr. Pearce, were looking to get people who were involved in what was called Peep a Day Boys, or Defenders, or Ribbonmen, or Captain Rock. And they had taken near Horselips 25 prisoners, 6 guns and 4 cases. So this is in March of 1820. And the reason for doing that is because of events that happened just a few months beforehand. And these ribbonmen, they would be coming around in the late at night and administering oaths to get people to join them, to try and get to reform some of the landlord system of the time, because some of the rents they wanted to decrease, the tithes, which was a tax upon the people to pay for the Church of Ireland, they wanted to abolish. And also they wanted, in some cases, Catholic clergy to stop asking for fees for sacraments. So there was all sorts of things going on. But what happened in January of 1820 was that the Blakeneys themselves were in danger. And the rumor, it says that there was a letter from Mr. Blakeney that if he was going to harbor certain reverend gentlemen in this house, that a body of men in number exceeding 800 would call at the house, which they would demolish and afterwards inflict a summary punishment on Mr. Blakeney. And the reason that this caused great concern is because the person that they were harboring, the reverend gentleman, his name was O'Rourke, and he was the Church of Ireland curate in my law, but also he was a local landlord, and also he was involved in trying to eradicate this ribbonmen in the area. And what had happened just a few days before that is that they had thought they had assassinated O'Rourke, but instead they had killed Edward Brown of Castlemoyle. So this was reported in the newspapers. He was related to the Nolans of Ballinderry. So all of East Galway landlords seemed to be under threat at this time. And in the reports of the time, it talks about coming to Horslip and that he was shot at from behind a wall and he was instantly killed on the spot. They had planned to murder Reverend O'Rourke. So all of this obviously would create tension within the area. These were reported time and again in the newspapers, and it talks about Reverend O'Rourke being a good friend of the Blakeneys and staying overnight with them. So they were in danger as well for their friendship with him. And again, reports there of what had happened to Edward Brown of Castlemoyle. And one of the things that appears here was that the persons in the forge exclaiming in an exulting manner, "The parson is shot." The words used by them were, "It was a good shot." And the idea of people gathering in a forge, and it says a number of men had collected in the forge, they were getting rings for pigs. That was their excuse. But according to the Connacht Journal, more than likely they were conspiring. And the blacksmiths in most areas, because of 1798 and the making of pikes, they were always considered to be on the other side of the British law that was in force at the time. So all of these was happening in 1820. So going to just move on from that. And again, just outside of Castle Blakeney in the village of Ahaskra, the police were being attacked. And in this case, it said that there was another carriage had sped past and they saw about 8 bodies on the ground. So it seems that Galway at that stage was on the verge of anarchy from the perspective of the landlords. Just a little bit further in, one of the reasons for that was examined in 1836 when there was a report for the commissioners of the poorer classes looking into what was going on. And what's important here is that the Reverend McManus of Monivea says there's a vast amount of labourers and very few in constant employment. And that is going to be what is the situation in most of the area and what has led to a lot of trouble. And what is going to happen as well is that you're going to have more and more people, less and less land, and obviously with potatoes and milk as being their sustenance. And that wasn't going to remain the case. This is census of 1841. So you can see Carramore here. It's in the area of 515 acres, but then it gives us the amount of people at that time. There's 143 males, 141 females, a total of 284 people. So that was 1841. So just a little bit on that, because that was just 3 years after this map was done. So again, to just look at the numbers there, the Carramore had 284 people in this area. So it was quite crowded, densely populated, quite a number of people in each house. And just what was going on in the local area as well, just as an aside, on the other side of the Abbott domain was a mill that was run by the Kavanaghs. And it's interesting, Michael spoke about Michael Kavanagh. He would be a great grandson of this Michael Kavanagh, or a grandson of this Michael Kavanagh, who was the miller at the time. He had a corn mill and a tuck mill. And Christy was telling me the other night that a tuck mill, there was a cotton mill there, and the tuck was used in the woolen industry to improve that. And that's an industry that died out in the area after the Great Hunger on Garth the Moor. So just to give a context of what was going on, and this is obviously on Garth the Moor, 1845 to 1853, so just a decade before the evictions of Carramore. So all of the people that were living in 1861 that were heads of house had gone through this famine times and had seen horrendous cruelty, horrendous hunger, and loss of life, huge loss of life. The 1841 and 1851 census returns highlight this. So I want to just pick those apart. This is the 1841 return here, and this is the 1851 return. So it's males, females, and total. So you can see Abbott had a total of 93 in 1841. By 1851, that had been reduced down to 39. But the one that we were looking for is Carramore, which we had seen had 284 in 1841. Now that had been reduced to 162 in 1851. So Carramore itself had been devastated by Garth the Moor. And this is the number of houses in the area. So if we go again to Carramore, in 1841, it had 53 families, 53 houses. There was one deserted house, so there's a total of 54 houses altogether. 53 were inhabited. By 1851, that had almost fallen in half. Now there was only 30 houses there. So it was quite a catastrophic fall in population for Carramore, even without the evictions that were going to happen shortly afterwards. In 1848, the parish priest in Abbey-Knockmoy wrote a letter to the Poor Law Commissioners in Dublin, talking about what was happening in his parish. Now, Monivea would be, or Ryehill rather, would be the parish of Carramore, but obviously Abbey-Knockmoy right beside us would have been where a good few of the people would have gone to. And he talks about that John Keneally, his wife and daughter in the townland of Pulsilla, and widow Ford of Larrabag, whose husband died also of starvation last summer, that they had died of starvation. So this is something that's happening right around the place, especially in East Galway and especially in the area of Abbey-Knockmoy and Monivea. And these are the names that were recorded by that parish priest these are the surnames of the families that died in 1847 and 1848. And if you go into Abbey-Knockmoy Church and just in the hallway, those names and where they were from are put up, thanks to Father O'Brien and the parish council back in 2017. And there was a commemoration of that to remember Black 47. And these are the places that they were from. And Abbott features, Carramore features. So it's something that's happening right around the area. And obviously the landlords are there in their big house. So what's happening with them? Well, we find little bits of goings on. And one of the things is the fact that they are consolidating some of their holdings. And in fact, here in 1848, there's advertisements for part of the domain of Abbott containing about 300 acres is going to be let. Now, why was that happening? Most likely rent was going down. Those who were paying rent up until then were either dying or immigrating. And so Blakeney was at some loss of rentals. So he was trying to get as much as he could. It's interesting that who he uses to kind of like rent out is Messrs. Guinness and Mahon. And most people would know of the name Guinness, and yes, it is of the Guinness family. But the Mahon name is interesting as well, because as we saw before, those were cousins of John Blakeney, because the Mahons were over in Castlegar outside of Ahascra, and it was a younger son who had set himself up as a land agent. And interestingly, that Guinness and Mahon became a bank later on. And for those who are familiar with 1980s Irish politics, and a certain gentleman here who was Taoiseach at the time, the Guinness and Mahon Bank in College Green, which was a descendant of that, which had helped out John Blakeney, was involved in a very dodgy deal in Ansbacher Bank in the Cayman Islands, but that's for another day. There's an interesting connection there. What else was happening for the Blakeneys? The hunt was still going on. Now, it's interesting, in the middle of a pandemic, we were shut down, and you would think that in the middle of Ungurtha Moor, that lots of things would be shut down, and one of the things would be the hunt, but no. Right throughout this period, you'll find in the newspapers the hunting appointments that Abbott is featured, and that continues right throughout. This is 12 years ahead in 1860, just as he's thinking of getting rid of his tenants in Carramore. The hunt is still on. And in fact, it seems that he was quite a horseman. He's got some horses that he's going to stand to stud as well. So it was an important part of how he would get his revenue. Also, because he was in charge of Castle Blakeney, the markets of Castle Blakeney, it turns out that the person Bartholomew Doyle had held this, and in 1855, just a few years after Ungurtha Moor, but before the evictions, that he was now trying to raise some money from that as well. So there was a dispute in the court about this. So that's a little bit of a background of what was going on with the Blakeneys. They were very involved in the politics, being MPs, but they were also involved in being the magistrates of the area. And he was, as I said, the High Sheriff at one stage. So his name appears quite a lot in the petty sessions. This is 1860 and 1862. So if you were trying to dispute your tenancy, you'd have to go to court. And of course, who was going to be in charge of the court was going to be the landlords. So it was really a hard place that the tenants were going to find themselves in. So I'm going to just look now at just some of the tenants and who they were that were there in Carramore at this time. So we see that there's 17 plots, and not all the plots were equal. And James Cook here, for instance, he is renting from John Blakeney. He's renting 104 acres, but he's only renting land because James Cook and his brothers were also renting Carneglass, and their house was going to be in Carneglass. So they were quite well off in comparison to others. David Rutledge, who seems to be quite prominent as well, he was renting the bog, 196 acres there. And then you're coming down to people like Harry Melody. Harry had two portions of land, one 1.5 acres, another 2.5 acres, and then a house and 3 acres. So between that, you're talking about 7 acres altogether. And the house itself was worth just 12 shillings. So it was an okay house, probably stone built, as most of them were, and probably going to have 2 or 3 rooms in the house. And if you look down the list there, you'll see that most of the people were going to be living there, but some people were also just renting land. So I'm going to just pick apart then who was the ones that were living there. And this is just a sample picture of what it might have looked in part of the townlands, in terms of attached cottage, in terms of a half door, in terms of 2-room or 3-room house with some sheds at the back. So they would have their chickens, their pigs, their bank of turf close by. So there's all sorts of familiar in this picture to just kind of like see what it would have been like at that time. These are the people who are actually recorded as having, on the left-hand side, the people who are having houses in the area. So we see Henry Melody and Patrick Raftery, Hugh Conroy, Malachi Killarney, Bridget Quinn, William Conroy, Thomas Mahin, John Parnell, Teddy Healy, Thomas Healy, Patrick Healy, Michael Quinn, Michael Roach, Timothy Dolly, Thomas Cook, John Cook, and Thomas Roach. And some of them were renting in common, and slightly like a Clohan settlement. A Clohan is where a group of people would elect one person and then they would rent in common. So these are house, office, and land. And I'm guessing that Timothy Dolly here is going to be the blacksmith, and that the cooks there are connected obviously to each other. So there's a relationship, whether it's a family relationship or some kind of relationship with this group of people that they are renting there. And again, you can see the Healys are living side by side. So Thomas and Patrick are going to be connected to each other, and Haiti again living close by. Now, have a look at the events then that happened in 1860-61. And basically it comes down to 2 X's on a sheet of paper. And what was happening with this is the cancellation books. And I'm grateful to Celia Healy, Celia O'Reilly for giving me this a few years back. The cancellation books, basically the Griffiths valuation was done in 1855. And the Griffiths valuation went around, wrote down the names of the tenants, the townland, and how many acres they had, what the value of the land was, and what the value then of the buildings were. And each plot was given a number. So as they went down the line, you're able to trace that. So what happens with this book is the fact that it's showing that Blakeney has totally taken over. And it puts down here, John Blakeney in fee, meaning that he's not renting it out to anybody else. He's going to take it for himself at this stage. So if you just look at this next one, you can see again, just the X right through it. So all of these tenants are going to be gone from Carramore. And there's a little notation in this, and it says, Mr. Blakeney wishing plots 1 and 2 and 3 to be valued separately, as he thinks he will let them into separate farms. And then the few remaining houses are to be taken down in May of 62. So obviously at this stage in 61, a lot of the houses are gone. So when it says taken down, what exactly is that? That's something that they themselves do. Were they going to be taken down and reassembled? Were they going to be taken down and just made into walls or whatever? But you can see from the video earlier that nothing remains of those houses today. So the song that Michael sang earlier, it talks about this. And that's the whole thing about what was happening, about going down that Abbott Road and seeing that they were all gone, and talking about that they were lonely, that the boys of Carramore, and it says that far away in America are the boys of Carramore. So let's see where some of them end up, because just down the road is another Blakeney townland of Clonkeen. And that townland is, in a way, kind of like much worse land. Sorry for those who are from Clunkeen, much worse land than up in Carramore, which we saw from the 1806 description was well drained and it was good farmland. So you have bogland close by in Clunkeen. You have the Abbott River, which sometimes floods, and then you have over here another bit of bogland. So it's quite a tight part of ground. And there's a bridge going over the Abbott River into Clunkeen itself. And in 1838, there were several families living there. And in 1855, the families, Mary Purcell was there, the Rhines, Thomas Dempsey, John Melody, and a Connolly family that were also mixed in with the Dempseys and Thomas Dunn. And those names are very familiar to local people because quite a few of them were still there by the time of the 1901 census and are still there. John Melody, though, his family are going to get moved by Blakeney over to Castle Blakeney itself. And John Melody's great-grandson, Des Melody, his wife, is going to be the person who starts St. Coon's in Castle Blakeney. So why is he going over to Castle Blakeney? Because Blakeney wants him on a different part of his estate, and he can do that because he's the landlord. So what's going to happen is that the plot of land is going to be divided up. So this is Clunkeen Abbott. And when the people are going to be put into Clunkeen, the ones who are present in 1855, their plots of land are going to be subdivided again. So this is some of the maps that are available from that time. And you can see that there's little bits of corrections going on, that the plots are going to be moved around a bit. So Clunkeen itself from 1838, and then this is going to happen in 1861-62, that the whole townland is going to be mixed up. You're going to have families going to be put down into Clunkeen, that the Purcells, Ryans, Dempseys, Melodys, Connollys, and Dunns would now have to share their small acreage with the families that have been dispossessed, some of the families that have been dispossessed from Carramore. So we'll just move on to this here. So in Carramore itself, there's small hints of where the families were. And again, thanks to Nuala for this. This is plot number 15. So the main road is just down here, and plot number 15 is going to be that of Thomas Healy and Patrick Healy. So they're going to get moved down to Clunkeen. And what's going to happen is that this townland of Carramore that had hundreds of people in the 1850s is going to disappear. This is the census of the area, and it doesn't make an appearance because there's nobody living in it in 1901 and 1911. So one of the interesting things is that in the song, it refers to the Reddington Roaches as well. So again, people are going to have some of the folk memories of why Reddington Roach was to blame with that. And again, just where they were situated, just up the road, and just to highlight there that wonderful bell tower. Again, seen as, in a way, a reforming landlord. By 1894, he was friends with Douglas Hyde, who actually stayed in his house in Ryehill the week before the Gaelic League was established. And Douglas Hyde went around from that house, went around collecting stories, especially up in Dunan, with the fords in Dunan. So it's kind of like one of the things about bad luck to Reddington Roach. He was the son of a gent, and it talks about the relationship with the Smiths, talking through Peter Dolly, or James Dolly, the blacksmith of the time. So let's have a quick look then at what's happening in Clunkeen Abbott and see how it's related. So this is Clunkeen Abbott in 1901 and the surnames that are there. And these are the surnames in Clunkeen Abbott in 1855. So you have Purcells and Dempseys and Dunns. And so you can see the Purcells are still there, the Dempseys are still there, and the Dunns are still there, and a few more families as well. So who are the families that then moved in there? You'll see that you've got Dunhu's mentioned here, you got Malachi Clarney mentioned there, and of course you have the Healy family mentioned there. So it's an interesting mixture that those families are still surviving there. Some of them obviously didn't go and immigrate, and we'll see that the Conroys are possibly going to be gone to Australia. So what exactly happened? Was it an eviction? Was it just a transfer, the same as John Melody was asked to go over to Castle Blakeney, or what? It's interesting, when I went to look for reports on this event, I found an amazing amount of information about events that were concurrent with it, especially in Partry and County Mayo. So this is just literally within that time frame period, and it had a huge amount of newspaper headlines with Partry, and it was brought up in Parliament. It talks about what was going on in other parts of the country, like down in Kerry. It talks about in Limerick, evictions in Athboy, in County Meath. It talks about going closer into evictions that were in Headford. It talks about evictions all over the place. One of the interesting things is that it doesn't talk about an eviction in Abbott, doesn't talk about an eviction in Carramore. Now, when evictions do happen, the union, sometimes the poor law union, are sometimes notified about it. For instance, here, the relieving officer talked about an eviction of a family in Tuam Electoral Division, the property of Mr. Daly, who would be one of the local landlords. And it talks here as well about Mr. Patrick Kelly, eviction of 5 families in the townland of Dunmore, the property of Reverend Lyons of Dunmore. So all of these are happening, but in all the newspapers that I've looked at, I haven't been able to get an eviction or anything to do with Carramore. It might be that it's there and I haven't been able to find it, or it might be the fact that while the people themselves saw it as an eviction, that it wasn't publicized as such. And Dr. Kieran Riley in Newt spoke at our conference a few weeks ago about the evictions. And again, here we have Mr. V. Brown reporting the eviction in the townland of Abbey, in Abbey West. That sometimes, because of the power of the local landlords, that some newspapers in the local area wouldn't give information about the evictions. But I've kind of scoured as well the British newspapers, and sadly nothing comes up about that. So it talks about Castlebar and what's happening in Mayo. So with all of that, I'm led to believe that quite possibly what's going to happen is that Blakeney just forced the tenants to move, and he gave them the option of moving down to much worse land down in Clonkeene. And this is kind of reinforced by what's going on with some of the other parts of his estate. And it says the lands are to be in grass. And this is going to be a common occurrence where the local people, and it happened in 1846, 175 years ago in Ballinlass, just outside of Mount Bellew, where the local landlady got rid of her tenants in order to have bullocks in. So it might be a question of that. And basically what's going to happen, like in Ashfield, that he's going to try and get more stock in. 1860, this is Ballinasloe Fair, and he talks about selling 20 heifers at £14, 14 shillings. So he's probably looking and seeing that there's more in stock than in people. And the way that he has then of doing that is to turn Carramore into grassland and to push the people down into close to bogland. So that seems to have been the case in this. There is no big write-up about it. What happens is that this grassland becomes for him the most valuable thing rather than the people. The lush green rather than the people themselves coming to pay him rent he can get good prices at Ballinasloe Fair, and for him, it's going to be that. So just to finish up a little bit on some of the evictees then, and some of their descendants, and also to see what other people were mentioned in the townland at the time, and see what became of them. So Christy here, I'm happy to say, got to meet some of his family, and also Nuala, and this is Sherry. And Sherry's great-great-grandfather was one of Christy's granduncles, and the family moved to Philadelphia, and through DNA, we're able to reunite that branch of the family, and hopefully some of them, we send out invites, so hopefully some of them are on here tonight. So this was the first time since the 1860s that the Healy's got together. So it was quite an emotional time, and Christy brought along the pictures of his family, and Celia also got to meet them up in Dublin, and Mary as well. So it was quite neat to do that. In the Abbey Knockmoy group back in February, Rosemary Tylerley talked about her family being descended from the Conroys, and it's quite possible that these are the Conroys that were there in Carramore, but we have to do a little bit more research on that. James Cook, that's mentioned, these are memorials from the moor in Abbott, and most of the local families that were mentioned there would have graves in the moor. So this is James Cook's grave, and also Miskill's that are mentioned. And Pat Miskill is mentioned as being the person in 1855. And it's interesting, the surname Griffiths, John Griffiths, a nephew of Thomas, who is going to be Pat's son. He's born in America. His mother goes to America, she marries a Welshman, and the family come home, and the Griffiths family, they set up a carpentry business, which was well renowned in the area and further afield in the last century. So here's Elizabeth Griffiths, nee Miskill, and her daughter Mary Griffiths, and then her husband, who was in South Dakota. And there's a little small cross recovered from the grave in Lead City, South Dakota. And this here, you may be able to make it out, it's Patrick Miskill, and he died aged 88 years, and his wife Mary Miskill, alias Kelly, who died in 1892. So these graves of the Dollys, the Hoare family has this wonderful implements of the forge, and the Dolly family are descended from James Hoare as well. So there's a combination there of the families. This is the Killarneys, and unfortunately, I thought I had a picture of this graveyard here, of Malachy Killarney's graveyard, which it's a nice memento, because when he died, John Blakeney wrote about how he held him in high esteem. And this is one of the people that had been sent down to Clunkeen Abbott, but he still kept working, obviously, for Blakeney at the time. So just coming to the end of the presentation there, just to remind you of where it is, and the fields that covered now the long lost homesteads of these people. And hopefully through this, we'll be able to recover some more of their stories and more of their memories. I was going to ask Michael to sing us another verse or three of the Boys of Carrowmore, if that would be possible. So would that be okay with you, Michael?
Well, there are verses I don't normally sing, but we'll have a go. We'll have a go at it.
Great.
Okay. In walking through those green fields, it makes my heart lament. When I think of my comrade boys and the hours with them I spent. When I think of my comrade boys who cheered me here before, and you may believe it's for them I grieve, the Boys of Carrowmore. Jim Dolly was their captain, his orders were obeyed. We never objected to anything he said. To see us play out on the field, he'd give a mighty roar. Then you will see a jolly spree with the boys of Carramore. I wish I was a landlord and had a large estate. I gave them all free holdings without either rent or rate. I gave them plenty of money if I had it in store. But to my grief, there's no relief for the boys of Carramore. Since now they're all departed, I can no longer stay. I gather up my little goods and I go to a merry gay. It's there I'll meet with some of the boys, of which I do adore. And when I drink, I'll fondly think of the boys of Carramore. It is their fun and merriment that causes me to speak. They were my only company at either dance or wake. If you were to take a rest, you could not sleep or snore. At the rousing fun to the rising sun with the boys of Carramore. Whilst life lasts within my breast, those thoughts shall ever dwell. With gratitude I'll count them o'er, and their music I will tell. Something came up there, now just missed me off. And all of these, they were so dear, their absence I do adore. May heaven bless and save them all, the boys of Carramore.
Good man, Michael. Good man. Matu,
Okay.
thank you very much. Thank you very
Okay.
much. I'm going to just stop sharing the screen there and I'll just do that. So that's my input for the evening there. And what I'm going to do is just to ask people now to just, if they have anything they themselves want to share, chat about, or to say. So I'm going to just stop sharing that screen, hopefully, and getting it done. So, and there we go. So I'm going to just go to the last one here. So I hope, there we go. I'm just going back to this. Sorry about this. And share screen. So thank you very much. I hope I give a little bit of information there on the background and stuff. So I'm going to just invite people now to just any thoughts, any comments, any questions that you have, and to first of all to say thank you again to Michael, and thank you as well to Madeline and to Amy for being with us tonight, and Michael especially for that wonderful rendition of the Boys of Carrowmore. So there's a few questions that have popped up on that. So Joe, thank you very much. Bridie, thank you very much. Marion, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kevin, as well. And I'm just going to open it up to anybody that would like to have a quick question or a quick anything in terms of what went on there in terms of the boys, or even an input yourself. I know I'm trying to find Christy and Nuala there, and if they wanted just to make mention of anything, to do that.
Could I ask for clarification of the transition from to Remington Roach from Blakeney? I didn't get the connection in this transition from Blakeney, and then you switched into Reddington Roach.
I think there's a little confusion there because Blakeney was the landlord but it seems that Reddington Roach has been blamed for some reason. And if somebody wants to jump in there, I'm going to say what I have heard through to Christy and Nuala and to Mal as well. Basically, what has happened is that Reddington Roach, according to one story, complained to Blakeney about the smoke from the fires of his tenants, Blakeney's tenants. And as a result of that, he got rid of them. Reddington Roach's estate, he had kind of like done in the English garden style. So when you went into his estate, it was a serpentine driveway that was magnificent. It approached that wonderful house of his, and it was kind of like to impress visitors. So if you were standing at any place in Reddington Roach's estate, it looked like a natural environment. There was no houses to be seen. You look down over Abbott Bog and all of that. So there could be a bit of truth to that in terms of, you know, that there was smoke coming in. Another story that has been passed down is that when Blakeney was bringing his guests down, because it would be kind of like part of the main road there as well, from Castle Blakeney going into Abbey-Knockmoy, going on then to Tuam and to Galway, that again, the smoke from the fire kind of like, you know, interfered with his guests' views of the place. So I didn't catch your name. I see it's Sheila Dolly, but I don't think you're a Sheila.
No,
You might be.
Oliver Dolly from Newtown originally.
Oliver, nice to meet you. Sorry, Ronan.
Yeah,
Ronan has kind of clued me in now as to who it is. So thanks, Oliver. But so what have you heard yourself, Oliver?
Well, not very much, really. Only things that I've picked up from my brother Mally, really. Our father never spoke very much about what happened then, so I wasn't able to avail of that information. I have one other particular point, and that is when you were listing the names of the people who were transferred into Clonkeen, yeah, I saw that Timothy Dolly also appeared in that list. But my understanding was that Timothy Dolly wasn't moved from Ryehill. He never moved to Clonkeen because he was a blacksmith, and therefore he was left in Ryehill.
Yeah, the list there was of the list of people who are living in Carramore. So like the Melodies and Timothy Dolly and others, not necessarily that they all got moved into Clonkeen, but they the list was those who were living in Carramore from the Griffith valuation. And when in terms of the Dolly family, and maybe Ronan could pop in on this. Sorry, Ronan. Maybe Ronan could pop in on this and just to say what happened with the Dolly family, especially with the townland and the fact that the Dolly Forge right now is right up against the townland of Carramore, but it's in a different townland. So Ronan, jump over.
Well, I have heard from Dad that we were like that our house was the boundary, and there was no back door from our house out because the little stream ran right just over the wall from our house. So that was our understanding what the boundary was. Now, there was talk that Blakeney did get in some time and needed to sell some land, and that Reddington Roach may have bought some land off him, which then extended beyond. So the field beyond the wall now and the one across the road does belong to our family now. So I don't know when that happened, or did you ever hear that story, Martin?
Yeah, in 1862, so soon after this, he is actually selling land. Blakeney is selling land. Now, it's in the landed estates segment, so I can pop that up in a second to see exactly who he sold it to. I don't know if it was Reddington Roach, but he certainly did sell land at that time. So again, there is financial pressure on him. You saw in Castle Blakeney that the tolls, he's trying to get as much money as possible from the tolls. He's also the domain, which is pretty much his own farmland. He's going to be renting that out in 1848. So he's in, I would say, a little bit of a tight spot at that time. The big person who would be of help would be the Mahons, because obviously, you know, he's set up as a land agent, Ross Mahon, and eventually Ross Mahon, as I said, with Guinness, is going to set up a bank in Dublin. But at this stage, you know, what exactly did happen? Why did he do it? I'm not too sure if the smoke is a wonderful story, but I'm not too sure if the smoke is the actual real reason for it. It might be, you know, partly to do with it, because obviously the houses on either side, you have this wonderful domain. And if you are going from Reddington Roach down to Abbott, it is a wonderful drive. But if you got all these houses on either side, I can see that kind of thing. But you're also having houses on really prime land. Whereas if you're going into Clunkeen Abbott, you're going to be into much less profitable land. So the idea is to just get it as much grassland possibly as possible.
Mhm.
I might be stepping on toes by saying that about the house and the smoke. So sorry about that. So Christy, I don't know, do you want to, is Michael there? Or is Michael gone? Michael is there, or that. So maybe you stick, I'll just unmute you there and to ask to unmute. Actually, if you could unmute Michael, just.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. That's grand, Michael, good man.
Okay.
And just maybe Michael, just ask Christy there and just what has he heard about the causes of the eviction?
This is Michael Flaherty you're talking to now.
Sorry. I'm looking at Christy Healy. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
You're in a different house. Could you do Lord's Code from your house, Michael Flaherty?
I have a question to ask you now. I asked you before.
Yes.
In my father's time and in my time, there was never a crow's nest in Abbott. Blakeney put the curse of the crows. He said there'd never be a crow's nest in Abbott until the last of the Blakeneys would die. So the crows came back last year, and there's crow's nests now at the end of our home house in sycamore trees. Never heard them as a child, and my father never heard them. But I wonder, are all the Blakeneys dead?
I think we'd have to do a seance at the moment here. Christy is lining up his pipe. He's doing smoke signals to you.
Right.
So that's not too bad. That's a great story, and it's wonderful. And I think there's another story connected to that as well, is that Blakeney, when he died, that his body was brought over to Castle Blakeney to be buried, and that the crows followed him over.
Yes.
Because he fed the crows.
He fed
and that he didn't stone the crows like we would do. He fed the crows. But the thing about that is that it's a wonderful story, because it was true for all of your life, and that was the story that was passed down. There are Blakeneys still in existence, but it's going back several generations since they were in Abbott.
Yeah.
So
I was talking to Matt Kavanagh last year. He died a month ago.
Yeah.
Michael Kavanagh as well. And I told him the crows was back in Abbott. He said, so long as Blakeney the bastard is not back, he said, I don't care.
I think we might have to edit that out of our video on YouTube. But anyways, that's the thing. It's amazing and that. But the other thing that I was trying desperately to find was an account of Blakeney's death, and I couldn't find it. And you know, and that's a tragic story. I could find it in oral history, but I couldn't find it then in recorded history in terms of the newspaper accounts, which you would imagine, you know, it would make a headline story that, like, you know, Blakeney of Abbott has passed away and stuff. But and even I looked in the death records to try and find his actual death record, but I didn't do that. Who wants to jump in and tell that story of what happened to Blakeney when he to die and that? Christy, go ahead there. I think Michael Healy, if you could just check Christie's to make sure that he's unmuted. We can't hear him at the moment. Say something yourself, Michael Healy. Right, Michael, we can't hear you, Michael Healy, at all, unfortunately. Yeah, your sound is gone, unfortunately, Michael Healy. I have to say Michael Healy, just in case Michael Flaherty sends me a smoke signal. Sorry, Michael. Yeah, Christy, unfortunately, we can't hear you at the moment. Hopefully, Michael Healy will sort you out to just kind of like do that, but we'll kind of like get it done. Okay.
Martin, can I ask you a question? It's Friday.
Sure, Bridie, go ahead.
Maybe I missed it, but do we know when the song "The Boys of Carrowmore" was written and who wrote it? Was written a little retrospectively, like.
Oh yeah, Michael Flaherty, do you want to jump in there?
All I know is that the blacksmith that wrote it,
James Dolly.
James Dolly, yeah.
Yeah, James.
He was left at the corner of Ryehill, and they didn't evict him because they needed him to shoe the horses. So
yeah,
he was a wanted man. That's all I know.
Yeah,
it's
done in his voice, in James Dolly's voice. So
yes,
he's the one that's feeling lonesome for the boys of Carramore and stuff. And maybe Alex, if you could just unmute your granddad there for a second. I don't know if
no, Matt, can you hear me?
Christy, I can hear you now. Great.
No, you talk about it. I know that.
Hello?
Christy, brilliant. I love the fact that you got your makeup done by Michael just now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had one time about, it was my uncle that told me that Blakeney called in the driver, the carriage, and he brought him in. And when he came in, he said, "Go out and yoke up Rambo," he said. "We have to go Tattenry with the carriage to meet passengers." And he yoked up Rambo anyhow and they hit off. Until late in the evening when they were coming down and the visitors were complaining, as you said.
Yes.
About the smoke. They all had thatched houses and the smoke was blown across the road. They could see nothing. And they were telling him, why didn't he evict them to stop the view of the visitors coming home? And he evicted them shortly after that, I heard.
Fantastic. And
yeah.
Rambo must be one of his prize horses as well. Because
he was the horse that drew the carriage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
he had.
Blakeney was big into hunting.
He was. Oh, he was. And there was a herd there, then Pat Glynn, he told me one time, he was a herd for Blakeney. He came from Woodlawn. He was a herd in Athlone or in Woodlawn. And the vacancy came up in Abbott and he got the job. And they were supplied with guns. And they were told when they go out, if that I want to have something coming back in the evening to prove that they were minding their job. Whether to be dogs or foxes or crows. But the handiest thing they could get was a crow when they were coming in the evening to carry. And he had plenty of dead crows around the house anyhow.
So there's that crow story.
And they said they followed his funeral all the way to Castle Blakeney. And that's what I heard about Blakeney. I heard he was broke. He had all his most of his land sold. And he was coming down the stairs this morning and he shot himself.
Yeah.
That's what I was told anyhow.
And there's also a great story about the widow, Kavanagh. I mentioned Kavanagh and Michael spoke about Mercy, the Lord to mercy him, who died there last month.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Michael, his brother, who died last November, I think it was.
Yeah. He evicted them that had a mill there at Cavanaugh's Bridge,
Yeah.
and I don't know what happened, but he evicted them anyhow, and he put them out of the house, and he burned down the plant. And I believe old Mrs. Cavanagh told him that she'd buy the roof over his house. And there was an auction in Blakeneys, and there was a pitch pine ceiling in the parlour, and she bought that ceiling, and she was supposed to put it up in their house in Abbott.
There you go.
Yeah.
So the widow's curse came through. I'm just looking around here, and I'm hoping there's not too many widows around here. Mal, stay with us for a good while here, but Ita won't be too bad as a widowed curse, so she'll be grand.
That's right.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks a million.
All right.
for that.
Okay, man.
Did Alex set you up there, Mal? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex.
And a you can start talking.
You can talk.
Huh?
You can talk.
So Mel, what story did you hear about the forge and your grandfather there, or your great grandfather?
Well, apparently the farm, our farm in Ryehill, the house, as we say, was there was no back door in the house. From there down was belonging to Blakeney. And some years later, Blakeney had a lot of problems, I think. And as somebody said, one of them died and this, that, and the other. But eventually, whatever, they finished up selling from the side of the house in Ryehill down to the Bog Road to Reddington Roach. And they hadn't been very friendly before that, like, you know. But however it finished up, whatever, like, but we apparently got a field down in the other side of the house, as you might say, right, you know?
Yeah.
Afterwards, so on, you know. So apparently when Blakeney died, whatever, a lot of things changed around there, like, you know.
Brilliant, Mel. Thanks a million.
You know, yeah.
It's great to see that the family name is still in the area. And it's like the Dolly name is kind of like several generations of blacksmiths and great workers. I had to put in great workers. I see Ronan there as well. So I have to say great workers, not just blacksmiths, but great workers as well. To just
I don't work at all. I don't do any real work at all.
Shh, don't tell all.
I just wanted to thank Mike Flaherty. I've been James Dolly's great-granddaughter, Deborah Clark. So James Dolly talked about heading to America because he missed all his friends. So he did go to America. He met a lady from Westmeath, I think. And if Deborah's on the call, she can correct me. But I do know she'll be listening to the recording. And they eventually ended up in Australia. And I've managed to reach out to Deborah, and we've confirmed in the last week or so that we are third cousins, or fourth cousins, or whatever it is. So I've been telling her that I had sent her on the words of the Boys of Carrowmore, and that tonight, hopefully we'll be able to hear. So I want to thank Mike Flaherty. It's great, great to be able to hear the song sung, and I know it's been passed down through the generations. I know my mother was talking about years ago, she had a tape with old Con Kennelly singing it as station mass many years ago, Mike, and that's probably where you probably might have heard it many years ago. And it's great that that song has been passed through the generations. So on behalf of Deborah and all the Dolly family, thanks for that, Mike. And obviously thanks to you, Martin, for everything.
Oh, no worries. Thanks a million, Mike. I have to say that was fantastic. So really, really good.
Really good.
I see a Deborah on the screen. I did ask Deborah to unmute there. I hope that's the right Deborah. Yes, is this the right Deborah?
No, a different Deborah. Deborah Myers here.
I didn't think it was because
I was trying to type it, but I wasn't quick enough.
No worries, no worries. Thanks the other Deborah. You're more than welcome anyways, you know, to do that. And I see Catherine Blade is here as well. So that's good because all these names are local to the area. Michael, can you tell us then a little bit about how your family, Michael Flaherty that is, and then we'll get maybe Chris, how your family came back to the area, because you're almost in Carramore, you're just up the road in Abbott and that, so just kind of like when the families then came back, because there's nobody there in Carramore in 1901, nobody there in 1911, and then Blakeneys, his land starts to get divided up by the Land Commission, and then eventually people start to come back by the 1920s. So maybe, Michael, tell us what you know about how your family got to where they were.
My grandfather, Pat Flaherty, he was living back in Pulsella, Ballyglunan, in where Paddy Fury lives now. And he transferred to Abbott in 1912. The house were built by the Land Commission, and they're divided up 35, 40 acres of land and an acre of bog and a barn for some cattle. So in 1912, my grandfather came up to Abbott, and my dad was 12 years of age when he came here. So we're here since. that's about it.
And long may you stay. Long may you stay. Thank God. And that. And
but the crows are definitely back.
We'll have to find out about the Blakeneys and do a little bit. I know that they were in Alabama.
Ask Christy Haley about the crows coming back to Abbott. What did he hear about the crows in Abbott? Just ask Christy.
Yeah. So Michael is going to set him up and that. Nuala, are you good to say something as well? Nuala, no, you're grand. That's fine. No worries. Go ahead, Christy, or Michael rather. And if anyone else wants to chip in, if you just if you go down and the bottom of your screen and just click on chat and just say, Martin, ask me, and I'll pop on. So, Christy, Michael, if we just get the sounds back on mute there, that would be great. I see Etienne Rougeux. Etienne, you wouldn't by any chance be in Louisiana because the Kavanaghs, when they got evicted, two of the girls, they go to I'm trying to think desperately now, where is the capital of Louisiana? And it's gone on my head. Somebody help me out here. And it's where the hurricane hit a few years ago, and it's just gone on.
New Orleans, Martin.
New Orleans. Thanks very much, Ronan. So the two Kavanagh girls go there, but there were already Kavanaghs in New Orleans a generation before. So the Michael Kavanagh, who died in 1895, and that's why Kavanagh's Mill, unfortunately, then a few years later, that the Kavanaghs were evicted from there. They end up with the Blades in Skahana, and also with the family up in near Tyquin, and the two boys end up with the Blades, and those are the Michael and Martin's fathers, and the other family there. So I don't know if Etienne, where are you located? If you want, or Christy, you're going to tell us there about. Go ahead, Christy. Right. Michael Healy, Michael, if you can hear me, we can't hear Christy at the moment. Sorry about that. So do your magic, what you had done before. Great, thanks a million. Christy, just say one thing and we'll hear.
Oh, Martin.
Oh, good, man. Thanks a million.
Yeah. I was back in the bog today, and I was talking to a man from Ballymacord, and he was telling me his mother, she was Commons from Skahana.
Michael
And
W.
no, Michael Commons.
Yeah.
He was a postman. The man from Ballymacord. He was a Finnegan man, I guess his name was, and he told him his grandfather was evicted out of Carramore.
Okay.
Ryehill. And
what was the surname, Christy? Do you know of the person who was evicted?
Yeah, Commons.
Commons, yeah.
You know Michael Commons, the postman.
Yes, Michael and Patrick.
Yeah, his father.
Yeah.
His grandfather that was evicted out of Carramore.
Okay.
And he got a place in Skahana.
Yeah.
And this man I was talking to now in the bog, he was very interested in it. I was telling him about it. And he said, I'd love to have been there now, he said, but it was quick notice.
Yeah.
And
he's probably gone to the pub tonight instead.
I suppose he is. He's gone to the pub, is right.
Yeah.
His daughter's living in the house now, he told me.
Yes.
In Commons' house.
Yeah.
In Skahana.
That's Mary Bellew. Mary is living in that house there. They did it up a few years ago.
Yeah. Is he an undertaker, this man I was talking to? He told me he was.
He is, yeah. He
told me that.
I'll put up his phone number if anyone wants to get a coffin or anything in the next while. You'll be able to just ask for the Carramore discounts. There's a special discount to to pay back for that. And no crows allowed at the funeral.
That's a good one, all right.
But do that. So do that. I guess part of what I'm doing tonight, and it's something that I've wanted to do for a good while, just give my own interest in the Carramore evictions. Nuala has been so kind to me over the years, and one of the things she always wanted to do was to find out about what happened to the Healys and her granduncles, and because they'd kind of disappeared. And when you're trying to find Healys in records, let me tell you, it's very difficult. When you're trying to find Healys that immigrated to America in the 1860s and 70s, it is very, very difficult. So back in, I think it was November of 2016, I said to Nuala, would you do a DNA test and we'll try and see what we can do that way? And Nuala kindly did that. And through that DNA test, an amazing amount of stuff has happened, because we didn't just find the Healys that had gone to Philadelphia, but on our other side, on the Hansbury side, we found people who had gone to Australia for kin, whose great-grandmother was one of the girls who went to Australia from Montpellier Workhouse.
Oh, Montpellier, that's right.
Yeah. So the DNA has been an amazing revelation. So anyone that has not done a test at the moment, please spit. Not right now, but sometime in the future. And I'll just say thanks to Ronan for making sure that his mom and dad spit as well. So we have a lot of spit going around the place, which is great. But to do that, I see that Grace, and I don't know if PJ is there or not. Grace, can you hear me? Grace Raftery Burke? And that if she's still in the kitchen, she's probably making a cup of tea. But if not, Grace, if you can pop in as well. But what I was saying there was about the Healys. You know, it's amazing what is kept still in our local area, but it's kept in our heads. So using the social media that we have now has been so helpful to reconnect with so many people. So if you could do that, it would be great. And I'm going to just ask Bridie Carey to say a few words about the Monivea Heritage Group that has just been launched. And to, like, one of the great things is it's launched by, you know, running rather than walking, because there's so many projects that they have started already. So just have a quick word there, Bridie, if you want to just talk about the Monivea Heritage Group.
Well, thank you, Martin. And I want to first of all say thank you to yourself for the wonderful talk, and thank you to everybody who contributed and spoke and contributed by their questions and follow-up information too. We set up the Monivea Heritage Association very recently, and I suppose it was maybe a bit of a lockdown project, or we got time maybe during the lockdown. It was something that a few different people had spoken about many times in Monivea, and indeed there were several groups already who had done different items in relation to heritage in Monivea, so we wouldn't be claiming to be the first or anything. But during this time, anyway, since October, since the Heritage Association was set up, we registered with Galway County Council, so we were a recognised group for the purposes of applying for grants and that kind of thing, and it gives us a little bit of status when we want to get anything done, or that if you are registered and recognised under Galway County Council. So just very shortly after setting up the group, it was the mausoleum was broken into just shortly after we set up the group, and so we kind of unintentionally became involved with the mausoleum, and that Paddy Miles always looked after the mausoleum, but in order to look for some funding we had to apply for a grant, and so our group applied for a grant for some repairs to the mausoleum. Now we got a small grant through the Built Heritage Fund, and we applied through Galway County Council for that, and the church are going to help us a little bit, but we still have a bit of a deficit in relation to that, and in that we need all the money up front. But anyway, doing the repairs to the mausoleum, the glass windows were broken by stones being thrown through the mausoleum, and the roof was damaged, and the door going into the roof was damaged, and the locks were damaged, and the glass in particular is, because it's so specialized, that's tricky to repair. But anyway, we're going to start shortly on the repairs to the mausoleum. The other project that we've kind of started, these are kind of, we say, physical projects, would be we want to do digital mapping of the old graveyard there, the Church of Ireland Cemetery in Monivea. It's in the middle of the village, but we don't have a list on there of who's actually buried in it. Now, different people have made lists over the years, but I believe it's incomplete. So we just thought it would be a nice thing in the middle of the village when you're standing there to know who's actually buried in that graveyard, and to make a little start on that. Now, other people have ideas maybe about maybe doing some repairs on that to the old church, but those are expensive. So we're starting small with that project to just try and do digital mapping on it. The other things we're doing then are like trying to gather stories from people. While they have stories, that we know well that there are lots of stories in people's heads and minds, but to get them out there and to get them down on paper is something that we would dearly love to do. And we're hoping to do that. We started working a little bit with Monivea National School, and the children have been speaking with their grandparents and neighbours and that as well during the COVID, as another bit of a COVID project. But we would love to get stories out of people while they have stories, and that includes everybody who's on here tonight, or old photographs, or old postcards, or old receipts from shops, that type of thing, you know, that people maybe have very little value on them hanging around the house, but they're of great cultural and heritage interest. So we like to do that. And the other thing is, you know, for younger people around the place, maybe they don't know much of the stories of the old buildings and the old ways of life, and we're hoping maybe to bring that to people through talks like this maybe. And I know Martin goes into schools and that kind of thing, and the other thing as well, we would like just to have a social aspect to it, to go on little trips and visits to places of interest. And to link up like this on Zoom, like it's only lately we have all learned what Zoom is. And like this, we had, I think I counted 33 people or something. It was amazing. This is our first Zoom talk as Monivea Heritage, and it was fantastic to have this number of people logged on from here, there and everywhere around the world on Zoom. And it's very encouraging to us. We've set up a website too, so you can find us on www.moniveaheritage.com. So we're just starting to build the website and doing little bits and pieces of research and adding all the time. So I don't know if there's anything else. There are more people from the Heritage Group on here too, and they might like to say something, but that's all I have. And thanks very much to everybody. And we'd be so happy to get more information from all the people on here. You know, if you're happy to stick with us and keep joined with us. Thank you all for your attention.
Thanks, Brady. All right, that's great. And that, okay, so I'm going to just go back here. And that, so as Brady said, we had just over 30, 35 or so there. So we're dropping a few there. I think it's past bedtime for one or two. And that, sorry, Ronan, for keeping you up. But do that. I really appreciate this. And again, to Madeline and Amy, who started us off, they were fantastic. And it's lovely to see such amazing talents within the area. And again, that's a part of our heritage. To Michael, amazing. The first time that I heard the song was at a stations, and I've always just enthralled by those kind of songs that are telling a story, but even more, they're telling the local story, because, like, you know, it's about our own place. We know who James Dolly is. We know where Carramore, we know where Clunkeen is. And it speaks to our hearts. It speaks to also our diaspora, and especially the folks. I see Kevin Carr here, which is great. Thank you very much, Kevin, for tuning in from just outside of Washington, D.C. And it's making those connections to say, welcome home when you do come back. And it's always great, whether or not you're like Oliver Dolly, I think, up in Dublin. Long trip down, Oliver. Hope you get your passport sorted out when you do come down. But wherever you are, home is here. And like in East Galway, we have lots of lovely places. Carramore there, I just loved the other evening when I went and just to take some film of it. It's just an amazing, gorgeous spot. So hopefully what we'll also do one of the days is take a walk. And just to kind of, like, you know, there's plenty of parking, I hear, outside people's houses. But we'll take a walk just to Carramore and just see the spots that are mentioned. And who knows, we might be able to do that in August. And we won't have to rely too much on Zoom then. We might have to do Zimmer frames for some, but Zoom definitely. So it'll be neat for doing that. So I think I've spoken my spake for the night. If anyone wants to say a little bit of an input or that, or again, if you do Facebook, could I please ask you to like and share the Monivea Heritage, to join. I noticed quite a few of you guys are in the Abenakmoy and Monivea genealogy group, but to share a picture or a story of your family. I know many of you have done DNA. If you go into your DNA and just mine the information to find out all the Dollys or all the Cooks or all the Flahertys or all the Healys that you can find and bring us all together, the more the merrier. We had almost 9 million people in 1845. We have about 7 million people on the island, but obviously we've got 75 in the diaspora. That my house is you know, not big enough for 75 million people to come all at one time, so hopefully they'll come at different times. And but at the same time, to just know that there's a special spot of heaven called Carramore that's in our hearts, that we all love, we're here tonight to just remember those people whose lives were disrupted by so many things. So thanks for joining. Michael Flaherty again, Muila Buikas. I'll go up and scare those crows away, so get a few more of them back in. Ronan, thanks for setting up your dad there and for spreading the word out to so many. Nuala, thanks to me. Thanks to your neighbor for helping out. Michael Healy, Christy Healy, Gary Mila Mahagad, and everybody else there. Really, really appreciate you guys coming this evening, and look forward to maybe having another sing of that. Now, if I put up the first verse of the Boys of Carrowmore, can we do like, Michael Flaherty, can you just direct us all? We can all unmute, and we'll take our cue. I'm going to try and find it first, and then we'll take our cue from Michael Flaherty, and we may as well sing it to sing us out. How does that sound to you all?
Good.
So if I can find this now here, and we get the words. Okay, now Michael's version I notice is slightly different than mine, and I just messed up this for some reason there. Is that good? Can you all see that okay? Right, so this is going to be crazy now, because I'm going to ask you all to unmute yourself as much as possible. If, like me, you cannot sing a word, we'll do a Milli Vanilli. And for those of you who are too young to know Milli Vanilli, or actually too old to know Milli Vanilli, it's about lip syncing. So we'll kind of like do that. So we'll try and keep in tune with Michael Flaherty. And Michael Flaherty will just cover his ears and pretend he can't hear any of us. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do the first 3 verses there, and that will be the end of our night. So many, many thanks to everyone. So Michael, are you ready? Hain, do, 3.
It was on a summer's eve,
year of 63.
I rambled down the
Airport
Comrade
boys.
I met them all together
Together at a
and stayed that night in
daylight with the boys Carramore.
Good luck be with
Good luck with their boys. I am sure
sorry they have
at the corner of Ryehill.
it's lonely they
There's
have
nothing. Go out to brawl and roar.
and
oh, how I sing alone.
The Boys of Carrowmore.
And Sheila,
but now we're all
sorry I am to say.
Right, there's one that's singing at a time.
The Boys of Carrowmore.
Well done.
Somehow I don't think it will make Christmas #1, but you know what? It doesn't have to. Many, many thanks, guys. Good night.
Thanks very much, Martin.
To everyone, and we'll see you some other time. I'm trying desperately to minimize this, to stop the sharing, and to then stop the recording. By the way, this will be kept as a bribe for everybody from now on. So if you're misbehaving, I'll just threaten you with this last video. Is that okay? And